So we're going to jump back into the testimony of John Scott to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, and it's discussing the first Clarke advice. So Simon Clarke, a barrister at Cartwright King, advises the Post Office on the use of expert witnesses in the face of Gareth Jenkins being discredited as an expert witness, and the things they need to consider in terms of previous as well as current prosecutions in the Post Office cases. But it appears that John Scott, the head of security at the Post Office at the time, wasn't told anything about this advice or shown it at all. Let's jump into the inquiry.
Can we move forwards, please, to the 15th of July, please? That's poll 406357. If we go to the last page, please, which is page 14, and scroll down, please, you'll see that it's dated the 15th of July, 2013. This is known as the first Clarke advice, yes? And if we go back to the first page, please, look at the first paragraph. Mr. Clarke said,
the Fujitsu there, a little typo, but this should be interesting advice on the integrity of the Fujitsu Services Horizon system in relation to expert evidence.
As I'm asked to advise the Post Office on the use of expert evidence in support of prosecutions of allegedly criminal conduct committed by those involved in the delivery of post office services to the public through post office, sub-post office branches. By and large, these allegations relate to misconduct said to have been committed by sub-postmasters and or their clerks. This document considers the provision and use of such evidence in past prosecutions and those currently underway. He will deal with future prosecutions separately. Did you receive a copy of this advice?
I don't believe I did.
You would think the head of security would be someone important to loop in on such things.
You told about the contents of it?
I don't believe I did.
Can we look, please, at page 13, paragraph 38 and following? 30? Yes, page 13, thank you. I'm not going to go through the entirety of the advice, but just go to Mr. Clarke's conclusions. I'm going to replace where Mr. Clarke says Dr. or uses the word Jennings with Mr. Jenkins. The reasons as to why Mr. Jenkins failed to comply with this duty are beyond the scope of this review. The effects of that failure, however, must be considered. I advise the following to be the position. Mr. Jenkins failed to disclose material known to him, but which undermines his expert opinion. This failure is in plain breach of his duty as an expert witness. Accordingly, Mr. Jenkins' credibility as an expert witness is fatally undermined. He should not be asked to provide expert evidence in any current or future prosecution. Similarly, in those current and ongoing cases where Mr. Jenkins has provided an expert witness statement, he should not be called upon to, over the page, give that evidence. Rather, we should seek a different independent expert to fulfill that role.
And it's understandable, given how damning that is, that they wouldn't call him again as a witness in future, because, you know, it's understandable that courts take a dim view on this, and once you've kind of wronged them in this sense, and potentially, you know, it's had an effect of misleading them when you've not disclosed all the evidence available, including stuff which might undermine what you're saying, once that trust is broken, it's gone.
Notwithstanding that the failure is that of Mr. Jenkins and arguably of Fujitsu Services Limited being his employer, this failure has a profound effect on the Post Office and Post Office prosecutions, not least by reason of Mr. Jenkins' failure. Material which should have been disclosed to defendants was not disclosed, thereby placing the Post Office in breach of their duty as a prosecutor. By reason of that failure to disclose, there are now a number of convicted defendants to whom the existence of bugs should have been disclosed but was not. Those defendants remain entitled to have disclosure of that material, notwithstanding their now convicted status. I've already advised on the need to conduct a review of all Post Office prosecutions so as to identify those who ought to have had the material disclosed to them. The review is presently underway. Further, there are a number of current cases where there has been no disclosure where there ought to have been. Here we must disclose the existence of the bugs to those defendants where the test for disclosure is met. Where a convicted defendant or his lawyers consider that the failure to disclose the material reveals an arguable ground of appeal, he may seek the leave of the Court of Appeal to challenge his conviction. In an appropriate case, the Court of Appeal will consider whether or not any conviction is unsafe. In doing so, they may well inquire into the reasons for Mr. Jenkins' failure to refer to the existence of bugs in his expert witness statements and evidence. Out of that, how much were you told?
I don't recall being told that.
You were told none of this.
I don't recall seeing this document.
That's a different question to whether you saw the document. You've already said that you don't recall being seen it, to how much of what is written there you were told.
The only thing I remember being told was that he couldn't be used because he's no longer he's a discredited witness.
Surely something where a bit of professional curiosity makes you ask kind of why, because he's like the star witness, if you like, for the post office in all these prosecution cases that the post office is bringing against sub-postmasters.
So you were told the bit about Mr. Jenkins being a discredited witness. Were you told the bit, and I'm summarising, about that fact calling into question the safety of past convictions?
I don't recall that.
Who told you that Mr. Jenkins was a discredited witness?
I suspect that would have been my line manager, Susan Crichton.
Susan Crichton? Mm-hmm. And did you mention it in a meeting or in passing?
I can't recall. I think it was probably more than once it was discussed.
Did you say why? What's Mr. Jenkins done wrong?
I suspect I did ask. I can't particularly recall.
Did you think, well, hold on, if he's a discredited witness, he's given evidence in a number of prosecutions for which my department is responsible?
So I do recall the solicitors discussing it in terms of reviewing the cases, and I believe they reviewed the cases going back a number of years.
Did you ask to see the advice?
I don't believe I knew the advice was there.
So you're the head of security, responsible for nearly a decade for the prosecution of sub-postmasters. Your department carries out that functions, and you neither saw this document nor had its contents explained to you. Is that right?
That's what I believe, yes.
Wow. I mean, surely that is something fundamental, probably for the entire security team to know, let alone the head of security. You know, your star expert witness, the only person willing to testify in favour of the integrity of the Horizon system, has been fatally undermined in the evidence that they've previously given and cannot be used in the future.
Whose responsibility would it be to show you this document?
That would be my line manager, Susan Crichton.
Do you agree, looking at it now, that you should have been shown it?
Yes.
And why do you think you should have been shown it?
Because obviously my team was responsible for investigations and submitting case files to the lawyers.
And you yourself have made a number of decisions to prosecute.
Yes.